Hello, you're welcome to yet another tutorial of mine, and in this tutorial I intend to show you how to implement the index function, but this time the index function that refers to the reference implementation and not the array implementation. So when do we need to use this index function reference implementation? Well, let's look at what we can do with it in this video. I'll be showing you how to use it to do multiple scenario manager. We've done scenarios before, but you would notice that the scenario implementation we had used had just one block and it had one item. Like this inflation rate and this interest rate, but we're looking at a situation where we could have scenarios, and within those scenarios we have sub items in them. For example, we have these as likely, what likely would happen. We have these as the optimistic, and we have this as the pessimistic. So we want to use just one switch to control all of this, selection, and that is why we need the index function but the reference implementation. So let's start to do something about it and see how we could resolve this. We have a likely situation, we have an optimistic and pessimistic situation. So the first thing I want to do is to build a data validation tool here, so that when we click on it, we can get our likely, optimistic, and pessimistic. So to do that, I'll just need to come below here, and then using the equal to sign, I build a small list of all my scenarios. So here is it. And then we go to the pessimistic. I'm doing this because I want to use this to define my data validation here. And not just that if any of these scenarios names are changed, it would also be reflected here. So as you already know, we can do that by going to our data tab, data validation, and then we click on list implementation, and here we just select this range to define the possible inputs for our data validation. So right now we have it likely, we have the optimistic, and also we have the pessimistic. The next thing we do is to use our index function to be able to pull out either of these options. And so to do that, I would start with an equal to sign and use the index, and it tells us what it does. But when you bring in the first opening bracket, you see that we have two kinds of implementation: the array implementation and the reference implementation. So we have talked about the array implementation previously. So what we're looking at is the reference implementation. So to do that, we need to, after entering our first bracket, opening bracket, we need to enter another opening bracket. Now this opening bracket is going to start the references for each of these, as the formula would put it, areas. So we're going to enter the first, and that is here, and then we're going to put a comma, and we enter the second, and then the third. And as the case may be in your case, you might have more than just three. In this example, we're just using these three areas. So I'm going to close my bracket, And so you can see the red brackets indicate the reference. So if I put a comma there, you see it jumps and asks me what is the row number I want to use. So for now, I just want to put 1 there. We would come to edit that later, and then we'll put a comma, and then it's asking for column numbers. Well, I don't need column numbers because for each of these selections, I just have 1 column. So Excel will understand that it's the same column that we have to use. So I'm going to put another comma, leaving that without anything, and it will understand. And the next requirement is that we should enter the area number. Yet again, for this, I just want to enter the number 1, just for us to see what happens when we implement the formula. And then I'm going to close my bracket. And that will be all for now for the function. So when I hit my enter button, notice that it gives me 2. So I just need to format this to become percentage, and then you can see it gives me 2. Now if I were to go to the row input, here it is, the row. That's why it's making it bold here, the row, and change this to 2. Notice that it gives me the next one here, 11. And so if it's 3, it's going to give us 350 in this cell. So I need to find a way to tell Excel that if I copy it down, give me the first row for this entry here, give me the second row for this, and give me the third row for this. So to do that, I need to go into my formula and make some changes. For example, for each of these areas and entries, I need to lock the row reference. So I do that with F4 after selecting it. So I'm going to hit my F4 once. It locks both row and column. I hit it a second time, and you will notice that it locks just the rows. That's because I'm going to be copying down, but I do not want it to leave any of these areas that I've selected. I want it to remain absolute to each of these areas. So that's fine. So for the row entry, we're going to do something to help us generate the rows. Now at this point, I'm going to introduce you to yet another function rather, and that function is the rows function. So the row function takes an array, and when we want to generate serial numbers, we could use the row function to do that. We could have manually done that. It's no problem about that. But if you want your formulas to be such that a user could just copy down and it implements, then we might need the rows function. So here I'm going to refer to A1, and so as an array I want it to be A1 to A1, and I'm going to close the bracket. But for the first entry, the start of the array, I want to lock the row identity. So when I hit my enter button, you see it gives me 1, and when I drag down, it gives me 1, 2, and 3. So all I need to do is implement this same formula within this formula. So how do I do that? I'm going to take this out. I just wanted to show you how it works here. So we're going to come in here, and rather than manually enter 1, 2, or 3, we want to just enter the rows. Remember, it's plural, the rows, and beginning and ending brackets. So within it, we just put A1 to A1. But for the first entry, we would have we'll have a $sign before the role attribute, so that keeps it fixed there. So we're going to hit our enter button now, and then you can see that we have the first entry. So if I drag down, you can see that we have each of these. So I need to format this. It's a number, and we don't want the decimals. Depending on what you want, you could do it. So here is it. So we're able to generate for all of this. So let's see how this works. So it's working now simply because the area entry is looking at the first area. So if the area entry, area number this time, is changed to 2, notice that it is looking at the second, the optimistic. And if we change it to 3, it certainly will be looking at the pessimistic. But again, just as we did with roll numbers, it would be fine that this be automated with a formula. So how do we do this? We are going to implement this using the data validation that we already have here. So we know that if we do a match here, let's say match. I've taught the match function previously, so you can always go to my previous videos to see how the match function is implemented. So I want to match for this, the pessimistic, and comma, and then the lookup array, I want to look up this. I actually could look up just anything, but look up the likely, look up this list that I've made here, comma, and then an exact match, and hit my enter button. So you can see it's looking at the third one. So we might just likely use this entry to define the area, and that's it. We're going to just define the area by clicking on this cell, and we're going to keep it locked. We're going to keep it locked that way. So while it is locked and we see it's looking at this other pessimistic. So we're going to copy it down, and that's it for us. Just have to change this, and so that's what we have here. So every time a user comes and selects likely one, all of this changes. And if the user comes and selects optimistic, it goes to the optimistic. And then if he selects the pessimistic, the same thing happens. So given this, we can easily extend this through, and then we have a scenario manager that can help us to implement this in our model. So we can reference from our model anytime we need any of these as inputs, and then as long as we change it here, it will be implemented all through our model. We could have taken the match function and then use it inside here. That would have still worked, but our formula would become really long and may take some time for users to understand what is going on. So currently we just have 2 functions that are at play within this formula, and then we have this cell that takes care of the match for us. So this is what you can do in order to build multiple scenario managers for your models. And so rather than have them independently like this, you could have them arranged under 2, 3, or 4 likely scenarios, and within those scenarios you have sub items that would define what your model would use. So I want to believe that you've learned something important from this tutorial. We've seen how we can use the index function, but this time the reference implementation to build a multiple scenario manager. Thank you for watching. Have a nice time.